Hey everybody, this is a video on how to write a CER for the Two Rocks CER. This year it was a practice test. Some years it might be the actual test. So we went over this in class. We talked about what you needed to do to get a proficient, and I showed you what you needed to do to get an advanced score. And so this video will go over those same topics. So this video is for those of you who want to review it before you get to the actual test this year, or it might be for someone who was absent on that day and wants to go over what we did in class so that way you're prepared for the test. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be using this information here to answer this question. Are rock 1 and rock 2 the same type of rock? So when we look at this data table here, we don't know what type of rocks they are. We know they have the same mass or weight. We know that they're both light green, but they have different hardnesses. Their densities are different and their melting points are different. So the big question is, are rock number 1 and rock number 2 the same type of rock? So what I always suggest is you go to the scientific principles first, because a lot of times the scientific principles will give them to you. You might look at the data and say, well, yeah, they're the same type of rock. They're both light green and they're both mass. But there's lots of different rocks out there. What if you have two rocks that just happen to be the same size, so they're the same mass, and they happen to be the same color? So let's look through the scientific principles. A property such as density, which is mass divided by volume, is a unique characteristic that helps to identify a substance and distinguish one substance from another. So this is huge. So when I look at this up here, density is unique. It helps to identify and distinguish one substance from another. They both have different densities. So right away, I'm starting to think maybe they're not the same. But let's move on. A substance is made up of only one type of material, atoms or molecules, all the way through. Well, that's true. This is true. It's not false. But this has nothing to do with the substance. We're talking about mass, color, hardness, density, melting point. We don't have the formulas for these. We don't have their chemical makeup. So substance really does not matter here at all. Likewise, a mixture is made up of more than one substance. That's true. But we don't know what the chemical compounds or the makeup of these rocks are. So again, a mixture really has nothing to do with this. And then solubility is the ability of one substance to dissolve another. But look, we have mass, weight, color, hardness, density, and melting point. We have no solubility. So that's why I struck these three through. They have nothing to do. They're all true in a sense, but they don't have anything to do with proving that these two rocks are the same or that they're different. But let's look at number 5. Hardness and melting point are both properties of a substance. Melting point is the temperature at which a solid substance starts to become a liquid. Melting point and hardness are unique characteristics that can be used to identify a substance. So I highlighted this here. I'd recommend that you highlight it on your test. So again, melting point is right here. Hardness is right here. It says they're both unique characteristics that help identify a substance. So right away, I know they have different melting points and different hardnesses. So I know for a matter of fact that rock 1 and rock 2 are not the same. And we can go to the third one. The properties of a given substance are the same regardless of the amount of substance. Again, the masses are the same, but it doesn't matter. You could have like a large piece of granite and a small piece of granite. They would both be granite. They'd have different masses. So that doesn't prove or disprove that they're the same or if they're not the same. All right, so now let's write our CER. We use the scientific principles to figure it out. So I'm going to answer this question. Are rock 1 and rock 2 the same type of rock? So here's my claim. Here's a proficient claim. Rock 1 and rock 2 are different types of rocks. That would be proficient. You want to go for the advanced. Rock 1 and rock 2 are different types of rocks because, and I probably should have get rid of that, because they have different physical properties, and I put in parentheses hardness, density, and melting points, period. So you can see what a proficient is, and you can see what an advanced is. So you can get to proficient pretty easily here. Now, what's my evidence? Well, do I have to have this part right here? Rock 1 and rock 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties such as hardness, density, melting points. You don't need to have this. all you need to do is have this down here. And I put this here because this was my advanced claim. So I'm going to put evidence that would support my claim. And it is rock 1 has a hardness of 7, rock 2 has a hardness of 4. So that shows that they're different. Rock 1 has a density of 6.25 grams per cubic centimeter. Rock 2 has a density of 8.96 grams per cubic centimeter. Then rock 1 has a melting point of 4,500 degrees Celsius, and rock 2 has a melting point of 2,576 degrees Celsius. So one, a lot of you in your last test, you didn't have your data. You didn't have your quantitative data. So you have to have this. You can't just say, oh, rock 1 and rock 2 have different hardnesses. Rock 1 and rock 2 have different densities. Rock 1 and rock 2 have different melting points. You won't get above a developing for that. You have to have the evidence. You have to have the data. And the data comes from here. One of the big things that a lot of you did wrong in your last test is you were pulling in data from your real life experiences and from other labs we did. Your data has to come from here. So that right here, this would be a proficient, well, it would be proficient. Now, how do you get advanced in the data? Well, it's really hard to get advanced on your evidence. You'd have to add more facts. Maybe you would talk about some of the other ones and why they're not something that you would use. But it is hard to get an advanced on evidence. Now, the reasoning. I wrote them here. These are the 4 things you need to have in your reasoning. And this is one of the reasons why, excuse me, I always say that you can't just have a sentence for a reasoning. You have to have, this will be the longest part of your test. This will be a good sized paragraph. You have to restate the claim. You have to list the scientific principle or scientific principles. In this case, we had 2 of them. You have to explain how the scientific principles link the evidence back to the claim. And you have to have a conclusion. So what I did for you, and we're just going to go through the reasoning for a proficient score, and I'll show you the advanced score here and talk about it a little bit, but I'm not going to read through it. So rock 1 and rock 2 are different types of rocks. I had it red because that's my claim. All I did was copy and paste that from up above. Scientific principle number 1, SP number 1, and you can write just SP number 1 if you want, and that shortens it up, states. And then I just copy and paste this. A property such as density, mass divided by volume, is a unique characteristic that helps identify a substance and distinguish one substance from another. So that's the first part of it. Now I have to do the blue. Explain how this supports my claim. Well, rock 1 and rock 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties, such as density. So if they have different densities, they're going to be different rocks. So I can't just list this, but I have to explain why this scientific principle links my evidence back to my claim. It supports it. Now, scientific principle number 2, well, the second one that I'm using, but it's actually scientific principle number 5, states hardness and melting point are both properties of substances. Melting point is the temperature at which a solid substance starts to become a liquid. Melting point and hardness are unique characteristics that can help identify a substance. So again, I would copy and paste this from up above. So that's the scientific principle. So you need that. Now you have to explain why that matters. Well, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties. They have different hardnesses. And what else do they have? I'm going to add one here quick. So when you go up here, they had different hardnesses and they had different melting points. So I didn't have this in here originally. But I'm going to put that in there right now. So that would even be better, that they have different hardnesses, different melting points. Therefore, rock number 1 and rock number 2 are different types of rocks because they have different physical properties. And that's my conclusionary statement. Now, if I wanted to have an advance, if I go back up here and I look at these, we talked about 1 and 5 are the good ones. However, I didn't talk about scientific principle number 6. Properties of a given substance are the same regardless of the amount, mass, and or volume of the substance. So I kind of talked about it. It doesn't matter if they're different because a small piece of granite would be the same as a big piece of granite. They just might be different masses. So theoretically, I could use this to say, hey, look, even though they're both 423, theoretically, they could be the same, and they look like they might be the same because they have different mass. But here I say the mass of two rocks doesn't matter because scientific principle number 6 states that the property of a given substance are the same regardless of the amount of the substance. The two rocks have the same amount of matter in them, but that doesn't help me identify them. So that's the only difference. That's the only thing I added in here to get advanced. That, and I put all my data back in. So when you look at here, if you have the two main scientific principles, number 1 and number 5, I'm fine with that. That would give you proficient. Now notice that I copied and pasted this part and this part from up above. And I also copied and pasted this part. So I really only had to type in 3 new sentences here. That's it, 3 new sentences. Everything else I copied and pasted from above to get proficient. So I'm not talking about a lot of effort here. Now, if you want to get advanced, you've got a lot to do. Again, you can copy and paste a lot, but notice how I put in all the evidence back into the writing. And that way, everything was there. It was solid. Everything's mentioned. You go above and beyond. That's how you get your advance. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions, any concerns about CERs. I'd love to help you. Just, you got to do it before the actual day of the test, and you might have to come in during T-Bird time. And depending on when you watch that, if T-Bird time still exists, that is. So again, ask questions, ask for help if you need it. Thanks. Bye.